How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Alfred Hitchcock.
Elvira here, Mistress of the Dark.
I'm Danny Elfman from the band Oingo Boingo.
My name is Wednesday.
This is Aurelio Voltaire, and you're listening to the Sounds of Halloween
podcast.
Hi, I'm Ken Kessler, and welcome to the Sounds of Christmas podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I want to start by saying thanks for joining us. If you're not new, welcome back. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Now, to avoid any confusion, I want to start off by saying there won't be any music played here. This is a place for conversation. I'll talk about Christmas music and some related topics, sometimes by myself and sometimes with guests. If you're looking for music, just go to soundsofchristmas.com and click on the tree or the player on the front page or on the Listen Now page. We play the best variety of Christmas music all year long. Well, except in October, when we play the best variety of Halloween music. And while we're still in October playing Halloween music, I couldn't let another spooky season go by without talking about Robert Johnson. For those who don't know, Robert Johnson was a blues singer and guitarist who died in 1938. He only recorded 29 songs, yet almost 90 years after his passing, many of those songs continue to be covered by some of the biggest names in music. Johnson's death is possibly just as legendary as the music he left behind. He died young, one of the first members of the so-called 27 Club, popular artist that died at the age of 27. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame called him the first ever rock star. There are many different accounts of Robert Johnson's death. According to one theory, Johnson was murdered by the jealous husband of a woman with whom he had flirted. In an account by the blues musician Sonny Boy Williamson, Johnson had been flirting with a married woman at a dance, and she gave him a bottle of whiskey poisoned by her husband. When Johnson took the bottle, Williamson knocked it out of his hand, telling him to never drink from a bottle that he had not personally seen opened. Johnson replied, "Don't ever knock a bottle out of my hand." Soon after, he was offered another poisoned bottle and accepted it. Johnson is reported to have begun feeling ill the evening after and had to be helped back to his room in the early morning hours. Over the next few days, his condition steadily worsened. Witnesses reported that he died in a convulsive state of severe pain. The musicologist Robert Mack McCormick claimed to have tracked down the man who murdered Johnson and to have obtained a confession from him in a personal interview, but he declined to reveal the man's name. So you can take that with a grain of salt, I suppose. One of the more Halloween-esque stories was that Robert Johnson had made a deal with the devil, selling his soul for exceptional musical ability. There's a good documentary on Netflix called Devil at the Crossroads that delves further into the mysteries surrounding Robert Johnson and his death, and I highly recommend it. As far as the music goes, well, there's a good chance you're familiar with Sweet Home Chicago, Come On In My Kitchen, and Traveling Riverside Blues. If not Robert's original versions, probably some of the many covers that have been recorded over the years. But I wanted to talk about three of his songs that you hear on the Sounds of Halloween. There's Me and the Devil Blues, where the singer wakes to the sound of the devil knocking at his door, telling him it's time to go. It was almost 50 years before anybody covered that song. Since then, it's been covered by the Cowboy Junkies, Widespread Panic, Simply Red, Gil Scott-Heron, Eric Clapton, and Leon Redbone, just to name a few. Next is Hellhound on My Trail, a song that was actually released as a single back in 1937. Blues historians have cited this one as one of Robert Johnson's best performances and one of his most well-known songs. This also took about 50 years before it was covered, and that first cover was by Fleetwood Mac in 1968. Since then, it's been covered by Cassandra Wilson, Leslie West, Todd Rundgren, and most recently, Larkin Poe. But the one that I think is actually the most well-known is his song Crossroad Blues. Hard for me to say whether this is his best song, but it certainly ties into the mythology surrounding his life and death. Quite simply, it relates the story of a man going down to the crossroads where he would meet and make a deal with the devil. It has been covered around 150 times, including versions by Cream, Stephen Stills, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Jeff Beck, Ry Cooder, who recorded it for the Ralph Macchio movie Crossroads, which could be its own podcast episode. It's also been recorded by the Allman Brothers, the Radiators, Buckwheat Zydeco, Robin Trower, Bob Dylan, Taj Mahal, Larry Carlton, Rush, Dion, John Mayer, Cyndi Lauper, Jeff Healey, Robert Cray, the Steve Miller Band, and Slash, just to name a few. And you'll hear most, if not all of those, on the Sounds of Halloween. I don't know whether any of the stories about Robert Johnson are true, but I think it's pretty cool that nearly 90 years later, his music and the stories about him and his music are still around, and they're very appropriate for Halloween. Thanks so much for listening, helping me share some Halloween spirit, and for continuing to support the Sounds of Christmas station and podcast. I already told you how to listen to the station, and you're listening to the podcast now, so my work here is just about done. All of our episodes are available on the Sounds of Christmas website. Just click the podcast tab. And we also have a Linktree page, and I'll put a link to that down in the show notes, that lists most, if not all, of the sites that stream our podcast, so you can scroll down, find your favorite, click on over, then subscribe, and you'll never miss another episode. If you have comments or suggestions on this episode, previous episodes, or the Sounds of Christmas station, feel free to reach out to me on social media or through the website. And you can also click on the Send Us a Text Message link that is at the top of this podcast, and you can connect that way. Thanks again. And may you always believe in Santa Claus.